Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think in a few words, what I would say is that I don't like the cliché of Chopin. This sick man, and so the music also is sick and kind of weak and sentimental. I think his music is much more, and there are lots of dramatic contrasts, extreme dramatic contrasts. The sound he created for the piano was something totally new, just by the way he had the accompaniment. So like that was the accompaniment itself lets the singing voice come out much better, and it's a matter of how he exploited the
textures.
Yeah, the harmonics. The harmonics.
Yes. The overtones.
The overtones.
Yeah.
The overtones, and also the harmonies. It's incredible because in the late mazurkas, you take, for example, the ending of Mazurka Opus 50, number 3. It's so chromatic and dense. If you just play those few bars, it doesn't sound like Chopin. It's more like Wagner, really. Also in another Mazurka Opus 56, number 3, it's very...
C minor.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, and also, sometimes people said that Chopin was great for the small compositions, but not for sonatas, and that's not true either, because he was a master of the big form, much more than many of his colleagues.
I never also understood this criticism. It's from total academics. Huh?
Yeah.
Coming even to criticize the two concerti, which are marvelous works. How can they?
And also, I think that there is so much joie de vivre in his compositions, like mazurkas. They are so lively sometimes. So, of course, he was a poet of the piano and marvelous melodies, bel canto, and all that, but also much more. So, this is what I would say in a few words. And it was very interesting for me to have an insight on Chopin, also on Chopin as a teacher. There's this interesting book of Eigeldinger, Chopin vu par ses élèves, and it's wonderful because he kept modifying his compositions. And sometimes you buy the Henley edition, it is urtext. But, for example, if you buy the Henley edition of this Nocturne, you have 3 times the theme, 3 times the same theme. But Chopin wrote on Jane Stirling's books and Mademoiselle Dubois also, who were his pupils. For the second appearance of the theme, he wrote a diminuendo and then pianissimo, and for the last one, he wrote a crescendo and then either 2 or 3 forte. So that's very interesting. In the Paderewski edition, you have all that, but not in the Henley.
Henley seems to have a preference for the first German edition. Being a German edition.
Yeah.
Yes. And how do you play with the ties in the very first mazurka? Because they
the very first mazurka.
I think that's a charm. But
yeah.
I prefer with the ties.
I play with ties.
Yes.
But sometimes I do not. But I don't know. It's just sometimes
he was very spontaneous himself, Chopin. So.
And this Eckler edition of the mazurkas is interesting because, like Opus 24 number 2, there are some ornamentation variants, and also in Opus 7 number 2. And if you buy the N edition, you don't find those.
No.
Because it's some handwriting comments of his on his pupil's book.
Well, I think the idea of word-text editions is opening up now with intelligent editors like Eke, how do you say his name?
Eke, I think.
Very interesting.
There's a Dutch movie, it's named Forever, and it also is about a pianist, born pianist in Paris. He studies nocturnal Chopin, and every day he goes to his grave, because it's the film in the movie is about Père Lachaise. So I'm curious, you have recorded all his work, so have you in your mind when you think about the ballads, for example, like a certain place where you were at the time when you studied it or something like that? Or is it just the music?
It's just the music. But with Chopin, I think it can be like that, because he was so, I mean, the Romantic generation is all about exchanging between different fields of art, you know, like Schumann and poetry and Eta Hoffmann, or Liszt and the Poème Symphonique and all that. They got inspired by literature so much, but it was not the case with Chopin, as you know. So
Mickiewicz was his...
Well, they say Mickiewicz, okay, but it's, yeah, maybe for the first ballad. His girlfriend was George Sand, but it doesn't mean anything. But I must say that I was in Nohant. You know, he was the most sought piano teacher in Paris. So at the end of, I mean, I would say his last 10 years, he almost had no time for composing in Paris during the year, because he was so busy giving lessons. And he would go with George Sand from late spring to summer in Nohant, and there he would have plenty of time for composing. And Nohant was a great place to see. I was in Warsaw and I went to the Chopin Museum, and it was very disappointing for me. Also the way an Italian architect redesigned it, so much interactive. I don't know. But in Nohant, I don't know, it was, I felt something,
yes.
like presence.
In the village, yes.
Village and the house.
The house, yeah, that's very quite special. It's been
yeah.
It's interesting to see the Chopin manuscripts, because when he didn't want you to see what his original conception was, he crossed out with a vengeance. You couldn't, well, probably with modern techniques of discovering what's under the paper, they can see, probably.
Yeah.
What do you think about Chopin's cliché of being or not being pianistic, like comfortable?
Well, I find it is pianistic. I find
Sebastián and I were discussing this.
But I find the first compositions sometimes are so much awkward.
Yes.
Like or
some passages in second concerto, like the development section.
Also
very awkward. Yes.
Yes, but the variations on Don Giovanni.
I don't play it. But you play it. Yes.
I don't like to play that piece. It's very difficult and so much double notes. And he didn't write so many later, but at the beginning it was some kind of technique more like Kramer, I would say.
Mm-hmm.